This will be lecture number 8 in our lectures on the artifacts in the British Museum. And in this particular lecture, we are still in Israel's kingdom period. We're still in the period of Hezekiah, but we particularly want to look at one incident in the Old Testament which is described both in the book of 2 Kings as well as in the book of Isaiah and as well as in the book of 2 Chronicles. Find your way, if you would, to slide number 113, and we want to look at the invasion of Lachish by the Assyrians. Lachish is a city that served as a protector city or fortress city some miles away from Jerusalem. And because Jerusalem is in the central spine of mountains in Palestine, there are a limited number of routes by which a person can actually go to Jerusalem. And generally, these routes involve passes through the mountains because a lot of the valleys cut diagonally across the country. In any case, Lachish was one of these fortress cities that served as an outlying protector for the city of Jerusalem. And it apparently was one of the most well-known or at least satisfying victories for Sennacherib of Assyria, because he put Lachish to siege in his attempt to attack Jerusalem. The tell at Lachish was excavated back in the 1930s, but then it was excavated further in the 1970s by the archaeologist David Ishishkin. And in that excavation, a lot of details were discovered that correlate with what Sennacherib himself recorded about the siege of Lachish. And Sennacherib actually decorated his palace with large alabaster slabs describing his victory at Lachish. And so we want to look at these slabs as they appear in the British Museum. In slides 114 and 115, we look at slab 3 of these particular slabs, and you'll notice that in the slab I have put some white dotted squares because these I'm going to show blow-ups of. But in any case, you should be aware that this is the invasion of Lachish by Sennacherib, and as you look at the slab, you will notice diagonal carvings on the slab that move from the bottom left toward the upper right. These depict siege ramps, and on these siege ramps you will see, if you look closely, you will see Assyrian siege machines that are pushed up these ramps so that they can batter at the walls of the city of Lachish. In slide 116 and 117, you see a close-up of the battlements of Lachish. The Israelites are the ones who are at the top. They are in the tower, the citadel of Lachish, and they are firing bows at the Assyrians who are attacking them. And then you can see in the bottom left of slide 116, you can see the Assyrian siege machine, which is a wheeled machine with a large battering ram with a point on it that is hammering at the upper part of the wall. You'll also notice that in the siege machine there is an Assyrian archer shooting upward, but you'll also notice a lot of elongated things in the sky that seem to be falling down. These are burning torches, probably twists of straw dipped in pitch and then set on fire, and they are thrown from the top of the Lachish battlements in the hopes of setting the siege machines on fire, since the siege machines were made of wood. But you'll notice inside the siege machine there is a man with a large ladle who is dousing the machine and its battering ram with water to try to keep the fires out as it is battering against the walls of Lachish. In the second blow-up, which is slide 118 and 119, you will see a rather grisly depiction of the skewering of enemies by the Assyrians. The Assyrians did a lot of torture to people that they captured, and they often did this as a means of intimidating the cities that they were attacking by impaling these prisoners or skewering them on large spears or posts and setting them outside of a city that they were attacking. They would try to discourage the defenders and simply say to them, if you continue to defend your city, this is what will happen to you. If you surrender, perhaps we would be merciful. And so there was a lot of quite horrific incidents that happened in Assyrian attacks. And of course, this is why someone like Jonah in the book of Jonah did not want to go to preach to Nineveh, because these were people that he despised, people who were violent and people who were so much against what he stood for. In slide 120 and 121, you will see two things. On the left side of this panel, you will see Judean refugees or prisoners of war as they are sent into exile into Assyria. There is a Judean man who is carrying on his back some sort of a pack or a container with some of his worldly goods, and he is flanked on each side by his two small children, who with him are going into exile. And then in the middle and on the right of this panel, you will see Assyrian soldiers who are skinning prisoners of war. Now, if you look at the heads of the prisoners of war, who are lateral in this particular depiction, you'll see that they have very tight curls on their hair and their beards. And this has led a number of scholars to believe that these were Nubian mercenaries who were serving in the Judean army against the Assyrians. There was, of course, some amount of interchange between Egypt and Judea, and you find that not only described in the prophets, but also in the record of the kings. And these may have been such prisoners, but their capture meant that they were going to be tortured, and they were being tortured by being flayed. In slide 122 and 123, you see three slabs, actually two, slabs 11 and 12, of the Assyrian army camp. On the left side, you will see Assyrian horses and a chariot in the center, a war chariot. And then on the right side of these slabs, you will see a rather oval-shaped depiction of the Assyrian army camp. Now, it isn't extremely clear here, and when I shot these slides in the British Museum, the lighting was not as good as I could have hoped for. They keep the lighting relatively dim. In any case, you may not be able to see it as clearly as you might wish, but the oval shape is a depiction of the Assyrian war camp itself. Then in slide 124 and 125, you see depictions of Assyrian slingers. They have a sling in their right hand, and in their left hands they hold an extra stone. Slingers were a very significant part of the advanced infantry groups in Assyrian warfare. In fact, there were essentially three kinds of infantry. There were slingers, there were bow shooters, and there were spear throwers. In slide 126, in the same set of slabs, you can see some of the archers. They are shooting the short bow, and they are aiming their arrows at the defenders of Lachish. Then, in slide 130 and 131, you see a depiction of Sennacherib's throne. Now, this is not his throne back in the heartland of Assyria, but this is his war throne in which he would be seated to receive prisoners of war and possibly even officers or kings of the cities which he's attacking. In this particular case, he's going to be receiving prisoners of war from Lachish. Behind him are two eunuchs. They're generally depicted as beardless, and so they're usually fairly easily identifiable in these bas-reliefs. And they are wielding fly whisks, which they keep flies off of the royal person himself. And then you see a man being presented to Sennacherib, and behind him, of course, there are Assyrian soldiers who are bringing him in as his prison guards. In slide 132, you see a slab of Assyrian soldiers carrying booty away from Lachish. The booty, of course, is going to be presented to Sennacherib and eventually carried back to Assyria. In this particular case, there is a chariot or a wagon that is filled with loot. There are soldiers carrying various kinds of things, implements that they have plundered from the city of Lachish. And then in slide 134, you see a depiction of the pillaging of Lachish and the exile of its citizens. In the upper register, you will see Assyrian soldiers on the left side behind a set of Judean prisoners who are walking toward the right in this particular depiction. And then at the very right, you will see a Judean family riding on the back of a little wagon. As these people head off into exile to Assyria. And then in the bottom register, you will see a Judean man taking a couple of his cows with him. They do not look very healthy. You can see the ribs sticking out, so these are cows that are probably starving. And then in front of him, you see his wife and his children. They also heading off into exile. And then on the very right, you see the depiction that we saw a close-up of earlier. In slide 136 and 137, there's a detail of this family, which we just mentioned, and their skinny cows as they are headed off into exile. You get a look this time of not only Judean men, but also Judean women and children with their robes and their head coverings. In slide 138, you see a depiction of prisoners of war who are musicians. In the left side of the slab, there is an Assyrian soldier who guards them, but the three musicians that are in the center and the right side of the slab are playing lyres. And while we don't know for sure that these are necessarily Israelites, they do look like Levantines, which means they are from the area of Canaan and Palestine. And it does remind us especially of Psalm 137, a psalm that was about the exile of Judah. Eventually in Babylon, of course. Psalm 137 is about Babylonian exile, not Assyrian exile. But nonetheless, it talks about those who were musicians. It says, by the rivers of Babylon we wept as we remembered Jerusalem, and our captors tried to get us to play the songs of Zion. And how can we play the songs of Zion in a strange land? And so the hopelessness and the horror of being a prisoner of war is depicted in that psalm and illustrated in Psalm 138 and 139.